Sour ground. I never expected the lottery would pick me, but then again, I never expected anything would come of my life except for one day I would be drowned as those before me were. Maybe this was just the way it was supposed to be. All the oracles can be wrong at some point, right? I didn't know how else to think about it. The ground is sour, broken and evil in places. There are few places where we can bury our dead, and even fewer many would consider consigning to that plot of land. A trek to reach, the burial ground had a feature few had seen in many years: a tree. We all knew what the tree looked like, because its depiction was on everything. We lived for the life of that tree, but it was definitely not something many of us expected to see in our lifetime. I would get to see the tree. That alone would make the trip worthwhile. But I would see the tree while carrying the remains of a beloved on the back of a misshapen pony. It was not exactly the way any of us wanted to see it. Elder Carus had been a town elder over Sweetwaters for many years, certainly longer than I had been alive, and yet he never seemed to carry the weight of his age with him when he moved. Therefore, when he died, it came as a surprise to many. There were those who knew how old he was, certainly, but they were spread thin by their own age by then. His death shocked the community so much that the customary silence of mourning, 3 days' time, was only punctuated by the sobs of the grieving. Not even the children seemed capable of mustering their usual childish whispers during it. At the end of the 3 days, the town, myself along with it, gathered together on water and drew lots. Everyone of age was given a smooth stone with a symbol on it. The symbol was inked on your hand so that the remaining elders knew who had each stone. There were not many of us. My stone bore the likeness of the setting sun. It was inked onto the back of my hand. I sat in quiet anticipation of who would be drawn for the sacred duty of accompanying the remains to the burial place, taking them to the tree, and then returning to tell of the world beyond the lake where we made our home. I did not expect it to be me. I was young and small, and often the last picked at the children's games of who could hold their breath the longest. I simply wasn't strong. The setting sun stone was drawn. It was my time to see the tree. It was my time to take the remains of the beloved to the earth from which we had come. I could have broken for all that I understood what was going on. Elder Carus was carried to the edge of the lake by a procession of boats. There a small set of ponies were kept for this journey. Those who tended them were called twins, for they lived on the water and on the sour ground of the land. They were as misshapen as their ponies, but they greeted us with smiles. One of them even spoke to me. I didn't understand the words, but the smile said things were well between us. I had my supplies for the journey: salted fish and water from the lake, algae cakes and watercress which I could keep for a time, but would need to eat early in my journey. The wrapped remains were placed on the back of the pony, and I mounted. It was like being in a boat during a storm, the way the creature moved. It took me several moments before I could truly be said to be riding instead of being allowed to sit atop. I set out from there the next morning, observing the sun rising over the land for the first time in my adult life. The next day, I had traveled as far as I could in the sweltering heat of the day. I would have to travel at night for the rest of the journey. Funny how different things felt off the water. It was as if the sun, already heavy, beat down on me like a constant crest of waves. I couldn't think of anything except keeping my head as cool as possible and allowing my mount to go in the direction which had been indicated by our elders who saw us off. I didn't know where I was going, only that I would know it when I reached the tree. The first night was not terrible. I could still feel the breeze coming from the lake. The second day, though, we traveled beyond the gentle kiss of the wind off the water and into the land where even the air seemed sick with poison. I didn't know what to think except to focus on the tree. By the third day, I wondered if it was indeed real. I could have been following an illusion. I could have been a funerary procession of one meant to follow the elder into the afterlife by carrying their body as far from our village as possible. Hope dried up like an unintended puddle in my heart. I didn't think anywhere could be so far away from where we began. Yet as I continued to travel, no blessed tree came into sight. I passed stone monoliths. I passed what looked like a face half buried in sand. I passed bones I shuddered to think of as mortal as me. Still no tree. Night fell without any attempt at subtlety. At one moment sun, then seemingly and suddenly the blackness of a star-struck sky. Or perhaps I dozed. The animal beneath me stumbled and startled me awake. When it crashed forward, headlong into the rotten dirt, I, for all my ungainliness, leapt clear. The corpse near forgotten, I considered turning back. My elder would not care to see me die in this place, so far from home, where my body would feed what? I had seen no animals since leaving the lake. Not one bird's cry to another, or anything that might even consider the corpse of my pony its dinner. 3 days from civilization, 3 days into the wilderness, 3 days from the familiar, and 3 days into the lost. I considered turning back. And then I began to drag the corpse in the direction of the unseen tree. It had to be there. It had to be. Otherwise, there would be nothing for me to die out there for. Still no tree. The sour ground invaded my lungs with dust until I coughed at every breath. I understood why now we humans had fled to the water. The water could only drown you. The ground? Oh, the ground changed you. No one would eat of the rotten ground. No one, and I was far from being no one. Then it was there, rising from the ground, with its brown and gold leaves splayed above to make a canopy which rivaled the sky for beauty. I reached it. I rested in its shade. I saw where those who had come before, the tree had carried up into its trunk some of our dead as it grew. Their faces stared out at me from the wood. I did the best I could to breathe as little of the toxins I had brought with me out in its presence. How had it come to be here, in the middle of the land, untouched by the grossness of the ground around it? It did not matter. The elder Karis would be buried in its shade. I had no tools, or even implements, only my hands, so I began to dig. The ground slowly began to change me as I dug. My arms, seemingly tireless, grew heavier and heavier, yet I could still dig, so dig I did. I dug until my eyes saw nothing but a film of the reddish-brown clay-like substance the ground had become. Then I brought the body into the grave. I laid down beside it to enjoy the shade after such labor. Crawling out again, I was not myself. I howled at the moon hanging above with no contingent of stars. I felt the fur sticking to my back, slick with clay. My eyes saw further than they once had. The ground had changed me. The journey had brought me home. And there I stayed, a creature of the sour ground, watcher over the tree and those who had come and gone.